George H.W. Bush was U.S. president during a period of historic change that would leave the United States as the world's sole superpower. Just months after taking office in 1989, the Berlin Wall came down.
The totalitarian era is passing, for a new breeze is blowing, and a world refreshed by freedom seems reborn.
With the collapse of communist regimes in Eastern Europe, Bush worked with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev to bring an end to the Cold War. The two signed a strategic arms reduction treaty, and Bush convinced Gorbachev to accept a unified Germany.
We agreed that we would try to build a fundamentally different U.S.-Soviet relationship, one that would move beyond containment to an era of enduring cooperation.
It required a leader who would keep a certain distance.
Jerzy Pehe was an advisor to Czech President Václav Havel. He says Bush's leadership style during the collapse of the Soviet Union and communism helped former Soviet bloc nations make the transition to democracy.
He was really a measured man. He doesn't stand out as a very charismatic figure, but at the same time I think that as I said, he represented a certain kind of dignity, which is also important for what the rest of the world wants to see in American presidents.
George Herbert Walker Bush was born into privilege in Milton, Massachusetts in 1924. Son of wealthy financier and U.S. Senator Prescott Bush, he attended elite schools, even becoming a baseball star at Yale University. He was raised with a sense of duty, and at 18, Bush became the U.S. Navy's youngest pilot in World War II. He flew 58 missions and was rescued by a submarine after being shot down in the Pacific. As World War II neared its end, Bush married his sweetheart, Barbara Pierce, in January 1945. They would have 6 children, but lost a young daughter to leukemia. Bush turned his back on a Wall Street job and moved to Texas to start an oil drilling company that made him a fortune. In the early 1960s, Bush ventured into politics as a young conservative for the Republican Party in Texas.
I know you and I share a lot of worries about the future of our state and nation.
Bush won a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. After a second failed bid for a Senate seat, President Richard Nixon appointed Bush as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. It was the first of several high-profile posts that Bush would serve in that would eventually prepare him for high office. Later, Gerald Ford sent Bush to Beijing to set up a diplomatic mission in China, and then made him director of the Central Intelligence Agency. In 1980, Bush sought the Republican nomination for president and challenged the fiscal policy of his opponent, Ronald Reagan.
This type of what I call a voodoo economic policy, it just isn't going to work.
Despite the criticism, Reagan chose Bush as his running mate, and the two beat incumbent Democrat President Jimmy Carter. Bush served as Reagan's vice president for 8 years, inheriting his conservative mantle. When he ran for president in 1988, he won easily.
I, George Herbert Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
Bush was sworn in as the 41st president of the United States. With the fall of communism and breakup of the Soviet Union, Bush worked to bring about what he called a new world order.
To make kinder the face of the nation and gentler the face of the world.
The first international crisis of the post-Cold War era came in 1990, when Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait.
America and the world drew a line in the sand. We declared that the aggression against Kuwait would not stand.
Backed by a broad international coalition, the United States routed Iraqi forces, driving them out of Kuwait in what became known as the First Gulf War. But Bush stopped short of sending troops into Baghdad, and Saddam Hussein remained in power. At home, Bush's approval rating soared to 90%. But within 2 years, he was rejected by voters. The U.S. economy was struggling, and Bush broke this electoral promise.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
Democrat Bill Clinton defeated him in the 1992 presidential race.
George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
But the Bush family name would return to the White House in 2001, when George W. Bush became 43rd President of the United States. It was the second time in U.S. history that a father and son both served as presidents. But George W. Bush differed from his father on foreign policy and embraced the doctrine of preemptive war. He ousted Saddam Hussein in the Second Gulf War.
His son, in many ways, ran against his legacy and ran against the policies that he represented.
Bush was the longest ever living ex-president of the United States and remained physically active into old age. He celebrated birthdays with parachute jumps. Bush suffered from a form of Parkinson's disease that forced him to use a motorized scooter and wheelchair. Bush attended his wife's funeral after Barbara passed away in April. Their 73-year marriage was the longest of any U.S. presidential couple. In a statement, his family said he was a man of the highest character. George H.W. Bush was 94 years old.